Have you put clamps on all of your bags of food just to keep your dog from sneaking in? Maybe you've pushed all of the food into the very, very back corner of your counters to keep your dog from sneaking one. Or maybe you've even put baby locks on all of your cabinets just because your dog knows how to open the cabinet with his nose and steal some food. If your dog keeps getting on the counter, keeps searching for food, even if he hasn't been very successful in a while, but he keeps doing it, you're gonna wanna keep watching this video because today we are talking about counter surfing and how to fix it. What's up guys, I'm Jenna with Dog Liaison Training, and today we are talking about counter surfing. We're talking about why it happens and how to fix it. Today, I wanted to give the big fancy term about contra-freeloading, and this is directly correlated to counter surfing. So contra-freeloading is the observed behavior in animals that says that they like to work for food more than readily available free food. And now this is especially true for the nourished dog, the nourished animal, the one that's not necessarily starving. But if you've got a healthy animal, what you'll find is that they actually enjoy the process of working for food way more than just kind of having it readily available sitting in the corner. Now, contra-freeloading is directly related to your dog's counter surfing in that you're adding a little bit of a challenge, and that challenge is enticing. So we know this based off of dopamine levels. Now, dopamine levels are the happy chemical. Dopamine is always released when you're excited about something or something wonderful is happening to you. You can also call it the pleasure chemical. And they have tracked dopamine levels in many different animals and the opportunity to work for food. And what you would think is that the dopamine levels would go sparking high as soon as they got the treat, right? As soon as you give the dog or the monkey or the whatever, the food, that's when the dopamine would be released. But continuously, what they have found is that the dopamine levels increase at the opportunity for the food. So my very favorite example of this came from Dr. Robert Sapolsky. He's a professor of neurology and biology at University of Stanford. And I'm actually gonna link a video in the description below if you feel so inclined in finding a little bit more about this experiment. But basically what they did was they taught a monkey that every single time he pushed a lever, he would get a treat. Push the lever, get a treat. Push the lever, get a treat. Guaranteed success every single time. And when they tracked the monkey's dopamine levels, what they found was that the dopamine levels would increase at the opportunity to push the lever. So as soon as he understood that push the lever, get food, that's when the excitement started coming up. That's when the happiness started to be released. And the opportunity for the food was much more enticing than the actual food. And in fact, dopamine levels decreased as soon as they got the food. So then they took this experiment a step further and they added in the variable of maybe. So what this looked like was monkey would push the lever and sometimes he would get the treat and sometimes he wouldn't. It was randomized, it wasn't structured at all. Sometimes he got it, sometimes he didn't. And what they found in this case was that the dopamine levels increased even further at this opportunity of maybe. So I has a history of getting food, so maybe I'll get it, maybe I won't. That challenge is enticing, I like it, let's do it. And still, as soon as the monkey got the treat, that's when the dopamine started to dwindle down again. So what this means for you is that your dog loves the variable of maybe. And what I want you to think about right now is Vegas, right? You go to Vegas and you know that it has a history of being reinforcing. You know that Vegas has a history of paying out a lot of money, but you also know that the odds are kind of against you. So the challenge of beating the odds, the challenge of getting the money despite reality is actually so stimulating and so enticing that Vegas makes a lot of money on maybe, right? And this is what the dogs are experiencing. They know that the odds are against them, that they're probably not going to get into the bag that's pushed all the way into the back corner. They know that they're probably not going to be able to get the treat that's sitting in the middle of your coffee table right now. But the opportunity is so enticing, the dopamine levels increase so much at this challenge that it's worth the shot. And no matter how many times you try to make it a negative thing, no matter how many times you yell at him or correct him or tell him leave it or whine or complain, it's never going to diminish the dopamine levels, the excitability of having that challenge of beating the odds. So how do we fix this? If we know that the dogs like the challenge, if we know that the dogs want to search for their food, they want to work for their food way more than if you just got the food sitting over there in the corner, how do we use this to our advantage? Well, for starters, if you're free feeding right now, I highly recommend you stop, pick that bowl up, because like we just discussed, the free food is not going to be nearly enticing enough, and it's just kind of encouraging him to want to go to that other less valuable, or I'm sorry, more valuable, less accessible food in the other corner, right? So if you are free feeding, pick that up. That's number one. If you're just feeding your dog in a bowl every 1-2 days, that's not that big of a deal. But if you're feeding your dog in a bowl twice a day, 3 times a day, every single day, that becomes very mundane for your dog, and he's looking for more engagement. He's looking for more challenge. And you putting that, yummy peanut butter sandwich at the very back of your counter is actually exactly the challenge your dog is looking for. So if anything, you are asking him to work for that peanut butter sandwich way more than you're asking him to work for the kibble that you're just readily available in the bowl. Number 2 is we want to use the scatter, hide, stuff method. Now this is something that I kind of creatively put together. Now the scatter method is in which you go into a big open field, and I'm not joking, just fling the food up in the air, let the kibble fly in all which directions, and make the dog search for it. This is a great way to get the dog to be exposed to a new environment. So if you've got a younger puppy who's working on socialization and being exposed to new environments, a field or a park where you can scatter some food and get his nose on the ground and sniffing and thinking, that's wonderful. The stuff method is probably where you're going to take a Kong full of peanut butter or some sort of food puzzle, but the free alternative to this is actually just to get a cupcake tin and put kibble in each of the cupcake slots, and then stuff on top of the kibble in the slots socks or toys or whatever is going to hide the kibble underneath it, so that the dog actually has to fling the toy out of the way in order to get it. You could also stuff Amazon boxes and put food in the middle of an Amazon box. The other solution is to hide food. So putting food in little secret corners where you can make the dog seek it out and sniff it out. And sometimes you have to help them, especially if this is a new game. You can Google find it, it'll help you. Especially if this is a new game for your dog, you may need to make it sort of easy so that they're proficient. Anytime that you're making a dog work for food, you definitely want to gauge the confidence level, because very similar to Vegas, remember, they're only going to want to continue doing it if it has a history of being reinforcing. So the first couple times that you play these challenges, if they're failing continuously, if they're not getting to the food, if they're not understanding the success rate, it's not going to stick around for very long. They're going to stop doing it because it doesn't have that reinforcement of working in the past. So it is important that they have enough success at the beginning that later on, when you make it more challenging, it's still worth going for it, because they know it has such a good history and such a value to their life in the long run. So using the scatter, hide, stuff method is going to help you really engage your dog in a way that he is begging, literally, to be engaged. And that is, I want to work for food. I want to think about the food. And obviously, if you're teaching your dog a new behavior, that's a great way to get the dog to work for food. The last method that I really want you to think about is getting the dog to understand that he is going to be paid higher if he's actually on the floor. So if we know that jumping on the counter is really exciting, if we know that jumping on the counter is going to be engaging for your dog, then what you want to do is make sure that you are combating the positive of being on the counter with an even higher positive of being on the floor. So it's not so much that we're making jumping on the counter bad, it's that we're making being on the floor better. So for me personally, I don't really care if the dog's in a sit stay. If you want to teach in place, it's fine, it's effective, but it shouldn't necessarily be the only solution. You can absolutely just capture a dog for being on the floor. So you'll see in this video with Yogi that I was actually capturing him for all of his decisions to be on the floor. I was just making eggs in the kitchen, and I captured him any opportunity that he decided to stay on the floor despite me having those yummy eggs on the counter. There were a couple of times that he makes mistakes. That's normal. And the one thing that I like is that mistakes are also informative. If the dog jumps on the counter, that is just as informative as when he doesn't jump on the counter. Because what he is learning is that if I jump on the counter and try to go for the eggs, I do not get treats. So that moment is just as informative for your dog as the moments that you are treating him. I am always feeding away. You always want to feed your dog where you want your dog. It doesn't make sense to feed him right by the counter if that's not where you want him. If you want him in the outside of the kitchen line, or if you want him on his bed, feed him on his bed. The idea though is how little I'm talking and how little I'm engaging with him. The more you engage with your dog, the more you make a fuss about it, the less likely he's gonna walk away and ignore you. The more likely it is he's just gonna sit there and be engaged and go, yay, party, 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 party. So it's important that it's as non-event, nonchalant as possible, and he's only getting the event of the payout when he's on the floor. The other thing to remember is that when I am playing this game, I'm really only feeding with medium value treats. I'm not feeding with very high value treats. The high value food should really be left for his engagements. It should really be left for when he's, playing the scatter, hide, stuff method. So if you're making it just as enticing to play the game in the kitchen as you are to play his games outside in the scatter, hide, stuff method, there's not a very clear distinction, and he's gonna say, well, I'll just pick, I love both equally. When in fact, what we're really trying to instill is that, yeah, being in the kitchen is cool and it's not bad as long as I'm on the floor, I get stuff and that's chill. But what I really love is the games that we play in the backyard, or there's the games that we play in the living room where mom hides all of my kibble and I have to use my nose to stuff it out. That is the real lesson that we're trying to instill. And if you're wondering how the high, medium, low value treats function, because that is a very important lesson, then I highly recommend you check out this video, because it's going to help you understand how your dog values food and how to use it to your advantage. If you enjoyed this video, hit like, consider subscribing, and I'll see you guys next time.